Now, I see you're in Perth. You have been in South Africa in recent days. There's a country that is facing all sorts of dire challenges, from an extreme energy crisis to crime rates, really. We don't sort of see in the West rape and murder rates put the country as the third most crime riddled in the world. Douglas, is there any hope for South Africa? What did you learn while you were there? Are they headed to Zimbabwe 2.0?
Well, it's a fascinating country, of course, and it's an extraordinary country. I've been there before, but not for a few years. And it's a country so rich in resources, and I don't just mean mineral resources and that sort of thing, but extraordinarily rich in what we rather unpleasantly call in our era human resources. They have an enormous amount of potential in South Africa, and it has been wasted by the government in recent years, which has been so corrupt. I mean, so unbelievably corrupt on a scale
Mm.
which it just boggles the mind. It's a sort of corruption of a sort of Middle Eastern level. That's how good that the leadership are at that. All the time, of course, it's fascinating. They do. One of the things I found most interesting was, of course, South Africa's government's been grandstanding on the international stage in recent months by taking
Yes.
Israel to the International Court of Justice for a charge of genocide they couldn't hold up. And of course they couldn't, because it's not true. But it's very interesting. Whenever any government does something totally grandiose like that, you can always tell they're going to distract you. They're trying to distract you and particularly their people
Mm.
from things they're not doing. I said to audiences in South Africa, it's that question of you should look at the hand that the magician has that you're not meant to be looking at. And in the case of the South African government, the ANC, corrupt ANC government, um, they've presided over a period not just of this corruption, but the lowest education standards in Africa. Which I mean, Somalis are better educated than South Africans. They've got more than 50% youth unemployment, which everywhere I go when I notice that sort of thing, it's just the biggest tragedy. Young men in particular just hanging around with nothing to do. It's unbelievable, appalling. Many of them have actually got degrees because they were told that was the way to do it. And they're in debt and they're unemployable because there aren't any jobs. These are the sorts of real world effects of misgoverning a country like the
Mm.
ANC has in recent years. There's an election coming up. It's not quite clear how it'll shake out, but I would hope that the South African public will vote for dramatic change of scene, because the ANC has so much goodwill in the 1990s in the country and internationally. And they've just spent it and spilt it in totally unforgivable ways.
And finally, I saw this piece in today's New York Post, a new poll from a non-profit think tank showing only 1 in 2 New Yorkers plans to stay in the city over the next 5 years. We've already seen an exodus from New York to places like Florida and Texas, and it seems many are still angry over quality of life issues, and that hasn't improved post-pandemic. Only 1 in 3 New Yorkers are happy in the Big Apple. You're a New Yorker. Are you planning your escape as we speak?
I'm not. I mean, I still love New York. I think it's one of the great cities in the world. But it really is something. It's something you and I have talked about before, Rita. But it really is astonishing to anyone who comes from outside the ways in which principally Democrat-run cities have been run into the ground. I've just finished some
Mm.
work on the fentanyl crisis in America, and you look at the drugs crisis in these Democrat cities, the sanctuary cities, the New Yorks and the Philadelphias and so on, and you see scenes there which genuinely shock people around the world. I was actually speaking to somebody in South Africa the other day who said that she had recently been to New York and was just appalled by what she saw. Because, for all of the challenges in South Africa, you don't see just zonked out, drug addicts just lying across the pavements everywhere. You don't see that. goodness knows the country has its own problems, but it's a question that really the governor and the mayor of New York and others have to ask themselves, which is how did New Yorkers get it? How did it get to the stage where New Yorkers were expected to put up with some of the scenes that we're now expected to put up with? How did this become normal? Somebody said this to me in Philadelphia recently, watching somebody overdose in the streets. Just how on earth did this happen? This has got to stop, and it doesn't stop. It gets worse.
It does, and I think I played a clip earlier this week from New York of rats being roasted on the street. People were, I think, consuming rats. That's where we've got to there. Before I let you go, you are in Australia. I still think we could encourage you to perhaps consider living in Sydney, maybe Melbourne. What can people expect when they come to see you speak?
I'm very happily in Perth at the moment, which is a wonderful place to be. And yes, I'm looking forward to being in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and yes, I'm doing each night a different theatre with the great Josh Zepps, and we're roaming very far and wide. We covered a lot of ground yesterday with a wonderful capacity audience here in Perth, who I stayed around and talked with afterwards. And yes, I'm apart from anything else, I'm very, very keen to know what's on top of Australian minds at the moment, because I know there's a lot going on here in Australia that's just like what's going on in the rest of the world. And you've got a couple of your own
Yes.
special little problems as well, it seems.
We do. I think you might be alarmed by how bad things are here right now, and there's a bit of apathy about it as well. Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your time this evening.
It's a great pleasure as always, Rita. See you soon.